Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdist Dave, and today I'm hanging out with Jacky Leung from Unbreakable. Or you got like a bunch of things now, right?
Yeah,
You're all over the place.
I'm a bunch of people at once now.
I mean, it was Death by Mage is how I, initially was introduced to you and met you when you were blogging, but you've kind of really blossomed out from there. So for people that maybe aren't familiar, do you want to give them kind of the elevator pitch and catch them up?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie. I'm still known as Death by Mage on the internet, but I am also now I'm the creative director for Unbreakable Publishers, which is a platform it's an RPG platform we have where we feature Asian creators and Asian artists telling their own Asian stories on the TTRPG medium. So we created Unbreakable, which is the first anthology, and we are planning to have more coming out in 2021.
Unbreakable, is that a lift?
I will say that for the three, so the
Or a
Unbreakable
nod, or a nod. We can use the word nod instead of lift.
I mean, like, I will say that, like, Caroline, Jazz, and myself, which are the three admins for
Yeah.
Unbreakable Publishers, we were all alumni from Ashley Warren's Uncaged. So we kind of just adapted the moniker, and we kind of just came up with Unbreakable. We don't, and that definitely was like several meetings where we were just ruminating about, like, what are we gonna call this?
I thought there was a Jet Li movie, Unbreakable.
There's a Bruce Lee movie named Unbreakable.
Is there?
Bruce Will, no, not Bruce Lee, Bruce Willis.
Bruce Will, yeah.
Yeah, because it's part of that M. Night Shyamalan trilogy, superhero
Yeah,
trilogy that no one knew about for a decade.
I pulled that up and that came up, but I could have. There was like one where like Jet Li was like kind of kept like as like I don't know, like a slave or a fighter, and they would maybe it was Unleashed or something along that lines.
Unleashed. It was Unleashed.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I had to think about it. I was like, Jet Li. I was like, let me go through the catalog of Jet Li movies that I remember in my head.
Yeah.
And that one wasn't really well. That's like one of the more not remembered ones, because like some of because it was way after Romeo Must Die, which was like one of the big breakout movies.
Yeah.
For Jet Li, because that was like,
well, he was in Lethal Weapon like 900 or something as well. Like that's like I've seen him first. But like I used to be into martial arts and still love a good martial arts flick. And he's got that one kick he does where he like defies physics. Where like he kicks with one leg and then the other leg comes up and kicks and he just like hangs in the air. Like,
yep. I still love that. It's definitely one of my favorite parts. Like, just watching him do martial arts. I think my favorite Jet Li movie, one of my favorite ones, is definitely the one where he's fighting himself.
Oh yeah. Little sci-fi action as well.
Yeah, it was a cool movie. I loved the idea for it, and I just loved the idea of like how they choreographed the whole thing, because there was a lot of symbolism and meaning between the two different Jet Lis and their martial arts styles. So that kind of was a cool element to that, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that was a like huge part of my childhood and growing up in the 80s. Like all the action movies and the martial arts movies, and like especially when I was younger, like Saturday mornings was like cartoons, wrestling, kung fu theater, and then like they had the monster movies like Godzilla and King Kong as well. So
yeah, I remember like even in the 90s growing up, like they had like this interesting part of like the martial arts theater where there was that brief stint, if you remember, there was like the Mortal Kombat TV show going for a little bit, and it would air like right around after Saturday morning cartoons would end. And I remember going through and I'm just going, wow, we literally got to live through all of it.
Yeah, I mean, rip Saturday morning cartoons. I don't think that's a thing anymore anyway. Everything's on demand or streaming 24/7. So
yeah, exactly. Like, no, I love that meme of like, you love that meme that goes around that says that like you'll never understand what it means to like literally dive bomb your way into the couch getting a drink while commercials are airing.
Yeah, absolutely.
which is very true because I've done that.
Yeah, now you just pause it. It's like it's live TV. You just pause it.
I know my cousin does. My cousin who's like 16, she never understood that either. And I was like, you have no idea what it was like to literally go. So there's a commercial break. I have 2.5 minutes to get something done and get back here and not miss a single thing.
Well, you have to explain it into terms they understand. It's like, think about playing a game online and your mom tells you to pause it, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or if you've mastered the ability to channel surf and and do quick select with, if you have a remote control that's good, that was like really hot up end and had the ability to remember channels, you can like watch 4 shows at the same time and flip through all of them while you're going through it. It's like, okay, commercial break on this one, flipping through.
Yeah. So I got distracted, as I often do. Before we started, we are talking a lot about kind of like genealogy and, kind of like, Asian culture and tradition, and you being a first generation American, like, how much of that you kind of had to learn, how much of it was like passed down. Are these discussions that you guys have a lot when you're, talking about projects? These things come up?
So it doesn't normally come up that often, but I will say that like when we did our big open call for the 2021 books, we had a big open call for that for writers and artists and even editors. And I had a lot of people asking me privately, they messaged me or emailed me asking whether they were eligible to come into the project, because some of them were of either mixed descent or people who they identify with their culture, at least to a certain point, but they never got to learn a whole lot about their culture, which is a common thing to happen for the dysphoria. So like I said to them, and I always say to them, if you believe you are this culture, you are welcome to come in. We don't really judge you for that.
There's no litmus test.
There's no litmus test, like, because we've had, and that is a very big one, especially for people who are mixed race. That is a very big part of their experience and their dysphoria. And then there's also people who are like some of my cousins who are like 3rd, 4th generation immigrant, like generation of immigrant children. So like they haven't gotten the exposure to their culture as much, and they feel like it's such a disconnect. And it's like, and they kind of go, am I eligible for that? And it's like, of course you are. I mean, the only thing we just ask is that as long as you identify with that and as long as you're telling an authentic story, that's all I ask.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty common too. Like after so many generations, you're kind of American, right? Or wherever you live, for that matter. Right. But there's no reason why you can't reconnect and explore where you're from, and your history, your family's history. I mean, we were talking about that a little bit, because when I look at like, my mom's side, like it's American for a long time, and we're very muddish, right? But then when you look at like my dad's side, my grandmother is directly, her parents were directly from Swedish, and she was raised by them, and speaks, we spoke both languages. So it's really easy to disconnect from that, but also like I feel like it can be fun to explore it and go backwards a little bit. Like sometimes, like I feel like when you go to another place, maybe you want to be from that place, absorb that place, so you kind of forget about where you're from, and then a couple of generations later, you're like, well, you know what? I feel like this is still an important part of who I am. And I've kind of like have been exploring that a little bit.
I think it's always good to know where where the stories of our predecessors have gone through, because I think it's part of that wonderful tapestry of what makes us us. Like my great grandfather actually did have a family tree that spanned about seven generations back. So he managed to form a genealogy of our entire family seven generations back. And I don't even know the names of these people, and I don't have any means to look up their information because most of those records are probably lost or burned or secured somewhere. And so like I will never know more than what's on that document that my great grandfather wrote.
Yeah.
But I do know that like for the most part, um, at least on my mother's side, they have been regionally been in the Guangdong province for like multiple generations, probably for like the longest. So my dad's side, he doesn't know because he never asked his grandparents, so he never knew. So I have no idea where any of that goes.
Well, yeah, and I feel like a lot of us have a lot of interest in this kind of stuff because, I mean, we're gamers, so essentially
Mhm.
that means we're storytellers, right? We like stories,
Yep.
and sometimes you're learning your own stories, and then it can kind of influence how you write stuff. Like Doug's in the chat mentioned, uh, he's Slavian, and he's kind of been exploring that through RPGs and researching that to incorporate into his games. I don't know,
Yeah.
it just adds another element to it when you can kind of draw from your own kind of like past and culture.
Yeah, and I think that was I loved how somebody said to me for Unbreakable Volume 1, it was unapologetically Asian. Um and I think that was one of the things we kind of took really well. Like that was one of the biggest compliments we ever received. And we kind of take it to heart now when we move into our new productions coming in. Where I think the first thing I said, I think the first when we were starting the meetings for 2021, or at least the plannings for it, and I said, all right, so I want us to be unapologetically Asian. I want this to be full blown. I want us to be we like big and bold. And so um I will say that the artwork that I have seen in the past month and a half from our artists turning in their artwork, it is those are some amazing pieces. I couldn't be more proud of what I've been seeing.
So, what do you guys got planned for this year?
So for 2021, we have 4 books released for a very small press. We have 4 books, one in each quarter that we're planning to release. We have 2 new product lines, Unbreakable Revolutions and Unbreakable Pathways. Both of them will be in the first half of 2021, and they will feature they'll feature indie RPG systems, and they're also anthologies. So they will contain different systems inside of them with different kinds of stories. So for Revolution, we are telling stories about anti-colonialism, resisting oppression, overthrowing tyranny. And so we have those kinds of stories. And I know we have a few stories that are featured in they're system agnostic, so they can fit for any kind of D20 system or any kind of open source RPG, like either the open D6 system, or I know one of the adventures they wrote that that it could work also for like Free League's Year Zero engine. So that could work for that. We have an adventure for Ironsworn, and for Pathways, we're doing stories that kind of centrally is themed around food, family, and traveling, and it's all about these kinds of stories that bridge and connect us to each other. Because for a lot of Asian cultures, like food is very central. I mean, not just Asian cultures specifically, but like a lot of cultures, food is very important,
Yeah.
right? And places have importance to people too. And we want to kind of connect those elements. And family is definitely one of like is definitely an element that's very consistent across a lot of Asian cultures about the importance of family and being together and community. So we wanted to kind of have a book that's thematically around those ideas, and so we have those coming out. And I know and we're also featuring a couple of other indie RPG systems like Pariah and Gun and Slinger, which was like out of a recent Kickstarter. But we do have a lot of we do have systems in there that are like meant to, or stories in there that are meant to be system agnostic. Because we wanted to we want to make these accessible to everybody and have everyone have the ability to play them in their own way. Um, and and I think we want to do something different too. Like that was our kind of our big thing, was we wanted to do something different. Um, and have something new to offer to people besides just D&D 5e, which we still are planning to do. So for the last half of 2021, we have our continuation of Volume 1, which is going to now strictly just be D&D 5e anthologies. So Volume 2 and 3 will be coming out in the third and fourth quarter of 2021.
So are all 4 books all adventures?
Yes, they're all gonna be adventures and scenarios. We have been asked by our creative community about other kinds of content to be made, so we've been listening to that, and I think we haven't made any decisions yet, mostly just because we haven't planned that far down our pipeline yet. We usually plan like at most 6 to 8 months ahead, so we're pretty much like we're skirting on like the wrapping up like the planning stages for third quarter, and then by the time we get to the first book release, we should have hopefully planned out the rest of the year, and then we could start looking at what 2022 is going to look like, but like halfway through the year.
So will you actually get to do any writing this year?
So here's the funny thing. I was forbidden to write anything other than the introduction and the forward.
Oh no!
For all the books. So I was barred from my own co-admins from writing.
Yeah, I was just thinking along the lines of 4 big projects in a year.
Mm-hmm.
As an admin, I know that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, it does. It really does, which is part of the reason why my co-partners, Caroline and Jazz, they said to me, "No, you're not allowed to write because we need you to focus on managing this whole thing with us." So I will say like that was the nice thing. It's nice to be around to do that. It's different. It's weird for me because I still write for a living. So to be in a part of a project that I don't write for just feels weird.
Yeah. So how much freelancing have you been doing nowadays? I mean, I would think Unbreakable takes up a lot of time.
I still do freelancing. I actually just wrapped, December, I wrapped up like 3 gigs in a row. So I actually had no days off in the month of December. I was supposed to give myself a day off. The only days off I had were Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day. So I had like no days off in the month of December, just so I could finish several projects, which was fine. I had fun doing a lot of those projects. I'm very happy about what I did for those projects. I mean, the most important thing is I also got paid.
Being self-employed and days off aren't really things that go together anyway.
No. I still try to impose at least like definitely a 1 day off where I try not to do anything. Like last month, I actually did manage to succeed in having 1 day a week where I'm just not working. But I try to still push for that hustle. So I've already, as anyone would know, I've already signed up for more projects.
Yeah. Well, you got to keep hustling. Never stop hustling.
Never stop hustling. But and some people have asked me, how have I been able to juggle the boat? I said, well, there's this advantage I have where I don't sleep a lot.
Oh yeah, that's a huge advantage.
It is
begun the Batman advantage. Training where you can subsist off of 2 hours of sleep.
Well, so I always knew that I had this, and I always knew I could function on very little sleep, but I only recently found out, probably in the last few months, my mother told me that even as an infant, I was that terrible child of, I would sleep maybe 2 hours at a time between bottles, and then I would be awake, like wide awake. And so and I was like, oh, so I've never had actually any sense of lengthy sleep. And she's like, no, you've never had in your entire life. You have never had a long period of sleep.
I imagine as she's saying that, it's like through gritted teeth and narrowed eyes. Yes, you never slept.
She told me, because in the very beginning it was really rough on her.
Yeah.
And my pediatrician told her to he told her to start replacing breast milk with formula like sooner. So I actually was off breast milk by 3 months
of
existence. So like, which is insane.
Yeah.
And
So my son. This is all you guys came here for, right? I think with my son, we started putting cereal in the bottle, right? Because
yeah,
like regular formula just wouldn't sate him and keep him sated. So you know, although we didn't have the problems with sleep like your poor mom did.
well, my
So,
mom actually also is a light sleeper, so that seems
yeah.
it's starting to seem genetic at this point.
Yeah. I mean, if you can keep improving on it, eventually you're going to produce someone that doesn't need sleep.
I guess. I mean, my mother and I can fully function with 3 hours of sleep, no problem.
Yeah. I mean, from my previous life, I've had jobs where I've had to work way too many hours in a row. I can do
Yeah,
it. I can't say I like doing it.
right. Yeah.
I've lost track of the number of times I've worked over 24-hour shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And because
Same.
with heavy construction, the type that I did, when there was a problem, sometimes, or my boss just kept scheduling jobs, you just kept working until the work
Right.
was done.
Yeah. Even for I think the I remember when I used to do in retail, like because I was like one of the auditors for when we did store inventories, I sometimes didn't leave for like
Yeah,
30 hours, like
yeah,
32 hours. Like I was in that store for 30 hours, and after a while people are like, you should probably go home. It's like I still have a job to finish. I can't finish
yeah.
this until I'm done with the audit.
I don't miss those days. I'm going to be honest.
I don't either. I don't either.
I've done
Yeah.
two um there is a couple times that I worked like insane amounts, like 2-3 days in a row.
Hmm.
And snow removal like used to be like that. It's like you
Ooh.
just went in and you didn't stop until it was done.
Right.
So that was just like blood
And
money. Like those shifts started at 18 hours. Like you just knew you weren't going to get done
it's
any
like I will
sooner
not
than
see
that.
you for a few days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Although it did inspire a lot of like D&D content when you're
Hey,
sitting there in the cab of a truck during a blizzard with nothing better to do.
that's true. I remember during my blogging days, because I was still working for Levi Strauss at the time. So like I would because folding jeans is very mind numbing. So, and for me, I was able to come with some of my best articles around the time of just standing there folding
Yeah.
jeans for like 8 hours straight.
So Doug wants to know, as a busy creator, how do you deal with burnout? Are there times when you have no fresh ideas?
So yeah, I have had some burnouts. 2020 definitely was a really long burnout period. But usually what I do to juggle that is I try to do something else that's not creatively associated with what I'm working on. So like if I'm getting stuck on something, I will usually take a pause, take a break, walk away from it, do something different. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll either read or I will play the piano. So I apologize to my neighbors frequently because I'm rusty. And sometimes I'll play video games, but basically, like I just know personally, like for me, I know I have my mind is constantly moving, and so I want to just give it something else to think about. So like whatever activity I know that will engage me, will keep me held, I will do it. And other times it just comes down to maybe I just need to unwind, relax, and ease off on the stress on my shoulders. So I've had ish. I think I've binged a couple series because of that. I know I binged the new Lupin on Netflix. That was really great. I can't wait for the next
It's
part.
on my list. I haven't
Um,
gotten there yet.
yeah, it's so good. And I at least you on a cliffhanger on 5 episodes, and I'm like, why?
Yeah, that's so wrong. Yeah, I just finished up
It's
The Expanse and the last seasons
yeah.
of Vikings. And
Oh
now it's
yeah,
like
I love the Expanse. So good.
it's going to be either that or Winx is probably up next.
I know I recently did a rewatch binge for Babylon 5 because
Yeah.
I've been a long time Babylon 5 fan. and it just got a remaster on HBO Max. So I've been watching the remaster, and I've watched that series so many times in my life that I can binge that so easily, and I could just even have it on the background playing and never feel too upset about it. But yeah, what I usually try to do is I just find a way to de-stress and try to remove myself from the situation just so I can allow myself to let my mind wander and think and do something else. That's usually that's how I tackle it usually. Um, I've known some people who've done a little bit different things like that, but that's what's always worked for me.
So you guys have done a lot of adventures. Do you have any plan to move in any different directions, like supplements?
Yeah, we did have people asking about supplements and things like that. So we do have talks about it. Mostly because the reason we have a lot of the parts of like campaign settings and supplements and things like that. The reason we have a longer discussion about those is because what happens a lot in those kinds of products is that it leads into kind of like a I guess the best way to put it is like it results in generalizations being made,
Mm-hmm.
or it results in diluting the identity of what you're trying to do. And so like I think for us is like for a setting, I think for us it would have to be something more like um how it used to be done, where it's like it's regionally specific and things like that, and then you can touch on that more, you can touch on that better, and you can expand on those. And for anything that's like supplementary, that's like game rules or what have you, um we that will have to still be something that everyone will have to we would probably have to pool like what kind of creators we want for those, versus having open calls for. So I think that's one of the things that we've been talking about mostly, is the fact that we want to, if we do such a product, we want to make sure we have creators that fit those roles versus having a large open call for that. And
You
that
guys have a
way,
pretty large stable, so I imagine you've got some
now
folks
we
in
do.
there.
Now we do. Between all four books of Unbreakable for 2021, we have over 60 contributors that are between writers, artists, and editors. It's been a fun time managing that many people.
Yeah, yeah. That whose job is that? Who has to wrangle all
So
those cats?
we all kind of delegate that, because everyone's broken up by whether they're artists or editors or writers. So Jazz handles all the editors. Caroline is the art director for us, so she handles all the artists, and I'm the creative lead, so I handle all the writers. So I only have to email like at worst case 10 to 20 people at a time.
Mm,
So that way we kind of all keep it balanced amongst ourselves.
that'll keep you hopping for sure.
Oh yeah, I get emails often.
Yeah. So what is there a particular non-D&D system that you're most excited to explore this year?
For in Unbreakable or just in general?
Sure. We can go with both.
I will say that for Unbreakable we have a adventure that is done in Forge in the Dark. And we actually have made art for the playbooks that came in it, because Blades in the Dark is a very pseudo Powered by the Apocalypse-esque system,
Mm,
and they use playbooks, and so those are your character sheets with all your abilities and everything. And we actually got art for each of the different playbooks, and I saw one of them the other day, and I'm just going, oh, this is going to be good. And it's set in colonial Philippines, I believe, if I remember the adventure correctly. And so that one, I'm just looking forward to seeing what the rest of it looks like. um Otherwise for me, I think one of the things I want to play, I definitely still want to get around playing Aegon from John Harper as well. So John Harper definitely was the creative for Blades in the Dark, and John Harper and Sean Nader wrote created and wrote Aegon, which is basically Jason and the Argonauts inspired.
okay.
So and Sean made a supplement for it, that's basically Transformers. And so I'm like, I want to play it because
Yeah.
Transformers. Just give me my giant robots. I'm a simple man. Just give me my giant robots.
Yeah, I feel you there. Like, I had pitched a game to my group, and that was basically just to play Transformers, using mutants and masterminds, just because it's a pretty flexible system.
Oh yeah, that is a very flexible system.
And and half of them looked at me funny, and half of them were in. So it never happened.
Yeah, I'm running a home game where it's basically like very Cowboy Bebop-esque. So it's kind of like space fantasy noir. But so think of like Cowboy Bebop imposed on Planescape, which is then imposed on the Milky Way galaxy. So instead of like the Great Wheel and everything, it's the Great Wheel's imposed on the Milky Way. So regions of space are now where like the fiends and devils are located, where all this Mount Celestia is located, and things like that. And so it's kind of done. So it's like a weird space fantasy D&D space Spelljammer and Mass Effect-y kind of game.
Yeah, I used to be like a D&D purist for the longest time, and it's like, we'll not mix steampunk stuff or guns or anything, right? And then I just like, then after a while, it was like someone flipped a switch, and I was just so bored, and it's like everything went into my games.
It's like we'll throw it in, whatever works.
like something broke in me. In the very next adventure, they were dealing with undead goblin zombies riding in power armor. So.
I mean, that's the kind of stories no one will ever forget.
Yeah. And nowadays, I'm like, whatever, anything goes. Within the bounds of whatever your group decides in the campaign you guys are playing. And
very true. I just last half of 2020 I wrapped up streaming City of Mist, which is a supernatural powered by the apocalypse system where you are the embodiment of legends and myth. So basically you would awaken a kind of mystical legend. So we had like characters who were like Alice in Wonderland. We had somebody who was the Scottish Wolvier. We had somebody who was Zipitotek, and we had somebody who decided to play the spiritual embodiment of Babe Ruth. So it was a grand old time. It was a noir series that we ran, and that was a lot of fun. I did love that, and it kind of made me reevaluate how I want to approach investigation when I do that for other games in my future.
So, what are you playing right now?
Right now, I actually this is the weird part. Like the last month or so, I actually haven't been playing a whole lot because I'm in between one of my Twitch channels that I stream frequently on, and like so we don't do a whole lot right now. And my home games have all taken a break because they needed a break, and so I've just been like, well, I guess I'm just going to play a bunch of video games and write all the time.
Yeah, 2 months. You starting to get itchy?
Yeah, I know. I do. I have the itch. I definitely have an itch. I do play. One of my groups started getting back in, and that was our D&D Ravnica Noir game, where they just wrapped up a coup from the Grohl clan, and the way they stopped the entire thing was, or at least pause it, was one of the characters was doing the Macarena. I was like, well, it is distracting, and nobody can seem to figure out where the source of this particular song's coming from.
Our ears all start bleeding.
Yeah.
Is that psychic? Is that a psychic attack? Does that do psychic damage?
Actually, well, funny enough, it was done by our mystic in the group, so yes.
In this particular instance,
our mystic just went, I'm going to perform the Macarena, and I'm like, well, I was like, I guess you're Macarenaing, and I can't believe I'm using this as a verb.
Yeah. Did they pass a perform check? That's the real question.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And I had to make wisdom saving throws for all the NPCs. And I kept rolling 2s and 3s, and I went, I guess they're mystified.
They're all just standing there shaking, why is this happening? So you mentioned streaming on your channel. So were you streaming RPGs, and which ones were you streaming?
So I'm on a channel that's twitch.tv/allnerdshere. I'm one of the founders of that channel. There's several of us. There's Simon and Robert and Kate and a bunch of others of us. And so like we stream different RPGs usually on there. So last season we were doing City of Mist on Sundays. And then on Wednesdays they had Haven, which is where they use a variant on From the Yoke, which is another indie RPG system. So we had that, and for our upcoming season, I will say that we are for this the group that I'm playing with on Sundays, we are doing For the Dungeon, which is kind of like an indie RPG where you play as the minions for the big bad evil person inside the dungeon. And so you have to deal with adventurers coming into the dungeon, and all the narrative politicalness of being minions of a big bad evil person.
Question: do you guys have to punch a time clock?
We are yes, we will. we have talks. We have had a few talks about our characters. And basically, I know one of us is definitely a slime whose actual job is to be the janitor. And I was like you do. And I was like, I know the character I'm playing is a mastermind schemer who has an invisibility cloak. And so I was like, oh, so I'm just the guy who lurks in the shadows all the time and snickers. Okay, that's fine.
I just want the slime character to be like a slime person pushing around a slime janitor cart, but it's all the slime. There's like
it's just slime. It's just all slime.
It's all, it's like all the creature just morphed into like the shape of a person pushing the janitor cart.
Yeah, I know we did workshop, like we spent a good amount of our sessions here talking about like what our characters wanted to do, and we kind of did like this weird like fantasy so the dungeon is now part of like a modern, like if fantasy was made into a modern world aesthetic, so like so adventuring is now a corporation. Adventuring is now part of a corporation and things like that. And so there's the above city and the lower city, and the underground city is where we all work, and that's who our boss belongs to. And so, and we're like, oh God, so wait, are we basically just evil incorporated? Is that what we are? Are we just office workers inside of this? Oh no.
It's funny, like the different directions the games are going in. Like we're playing a D&D game, Dungeons and Delving, where Ted like pitched this idea. Is like, hey, it's a modern world, but it's a reality game show where teams of adventurers compete in a dungeon, which is actually a game that came out in like during the 3.5 or Goodman Games put out a book called X-Crawl, which is essentially
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So Ted came up. Ted reinvented X-Crawl. He started pitching the idea. I'm like, oh, you mean X-Crawl? And then he went out and picked up the book. But yeah, so we've been playing with that, and it's like I'm hoping we like have a chance to get into some things like, well, there's monsters in the dungeon. Where are they coming from? Are they real monsters? Are they animatronic monsters? Are we going to discover and stumble like there's some like breeding ground?
Is this Westworld?
or where they're cloning them, or like maybe there's some more moral dilemmas, like they're cloning and making monsters living creatures so that we can kill them. That seems a bit wrong.
There's always layers, right? There's always layers to how far you can build. You can build that to the point where it's like simple idea, and then oh my goodness.
yeah. So I don't know how much we'll get into it and where it'll go, but like one session is like in the dungeon, and then the following session is outside the dungeon. Like there's like the compound where all the adventurers live during the show. So like it's like what goes on behind the scenes and the interactions.
I will say our big showstopper for our channel is PWN Live, which is our wrestling RPG show. It uses the Worldwide Wrestling RPG system, and that is probably my favorite show. A lot of our fans came on our channel came from that for that show. Um, we are planning to do like maybe like once a month returns. Mostly just because we don't want we want to try other things, but we also know that our fans love it, so we don't want to make it too like saturated.
Yeah.
And so yeah, our stable of characters is huge. We have such a large stable, and we've evolved it to the point where in our second season I played as basically the equivalent of like a Terminator.
Yeah.
And we had a character, the Vessel, who was basically a time traveler riding an Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Yeah, so so it's like we were like, wow, we really pulled the full stop when it came to wrestling in the story sense of if we could go as outrageous as we can, we did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it feels like you should, right?
Right. Yeah.
It fits right in with that. Shalander wants to know, are viewers paying to add creatures to the dungeon? I don't know, but 10 might be bribable. So you start throwing 20s at him and see what happens.
Yeah, you know, money talks.
That's right. It's like, oh, well, TPK. It looks like I feel like during one of the Saber Dice games that did come up, and for a ridiculous amount, the DM did offer to off whatever character it was.
I know for Extra Life last year we did. I was playing in a Aliens RPG from the one that's from Free League, and the GM who was doing the fundraiser, one of the incentives was to have a random alien encounter. And if anyone who's familiar with all the Alien movies, any kind of alien encounter is generally fatal. We had like 4 incentives, and in the span of 30 minutes, there were people in the donations just go like they threw all the money into that incentive like within 30 minutes of the show, and we all just went. Our poor GM was like, well, I guess I need to figure out when I'm going to put these in. Oh boy. My character was the first to die within 20 minutes.
Was it a total TPK?
No, surprisingly enough, no. It was we had two of the original characters survive, and I came in as a Marine that awoken from hyposleep on the ship that we were on. So we still managed to still have everyone playing. We were just playing different characters from the original. So only 2 of the original 6 characters actually survived. But we were very tempted to space one of them. It was very tempting because they were one of like the corporate goons, and so they actually had like the full information of what's going on. And if anyone who's watched any of the Aliens movies knows, usually those guys you should never trust with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I mean, not even just the Alien movies, any of them, right? There's always that character.
That character is like, I'm here to protect corporate interests.
Yeah.
Oh, so I should space you first.
Let's just get this out of the way. I have not played that game yet. It's on a long list of games to play, but yeah, some sci-fi horror sounds like fun.
Yeah, I wrote for another space themed RPG, and I think you might like it. It's Drakkar. It's called Drakkar by JVC Perry, and it's basically it ties in a lot of Norse themes into it as well. And basically, you are all on a generational spaceship going to finding Valhalla, and basically you are trying to find the coordinates that will lead you to there, and you have to traverse through space. And the way you do that is by using dominoes. So you don't actually use dice to do any of the resolution mechanics. It's actually done by dominoes. And the idea is that you're supposed to create this Nordic rune for travel by arranging the dominoes in a certain way. And so as you're resolving the story, you're encountering troubles. and I wrote one of the troubles for the new expansion. But it's a really fun little game that I recently got to work for, and I got to play myself personally. So that was a lot of fun.
I feel slightly morally opposed to that mission. You can't go to Valhalla by flying a ship there. Not opposed to the game, just the mission.
Yeah, the mission is it's kind of interesting. I love the idea behind it, at least, and I will say that like for the expansions, like I know a few writers wrote for it as well. Some of the troubles, so we wrote like a couple of the troubles in there, and that was really nice to see people from the community coming in and working on that a little bit. I will say that mine was inspired by was it the Veneer, and so I had that, and I know somebody wrote something about a rogue AI, and I was like, of course, there's always one rogue AI.
How could you not have the rogue AI?
There's always one rogue AI.
Do you have a particular genre you prefer to write for?
I don't normally have a particular genre. I will say though, before I was a fantasy nerd, I was definitely the sci-fi nerd.
Mm-hmm.
I was a long-time sci-fi nerd before I became a fantasy nerd, because I didn't pick up Dragonlance until I was like a junior in high school, and that was actually one of the bigger breakout fantasy novels for me, versus others that I attempted over the years. And I was a big Star Trek and Star Wars fan when I was like 10. So like I've always been a sci-fi fan and sci-fi fantasy fan for like the longest time. I will say though, reading the original Stargate novel really was jarring compared to the movies. I was like, what am I reading?
In a good way or in a bad way?
It was just different. I think it's because like when you look at Stargate, because I know they're making an RPG for it. Like I remember when I first watched the Stargate movie, and then I found out there was a book, and I was like, oh, let me read the book. And then it's like, it's written in a way where it's more like a fantasy novel than it is written as a sci-fi novel. And so like it threw me off, but it definitely got me to think about fantasy later on. And so at least I can say that book helped me get me ready for fantasy in that regard.
It was the gateway drug for you.
It was the literal gateway.
I'd be surprised to find out there wasn't already a Stargate RPG.
I know. Well, actually, they used to. They had one back during the 3.5 boon when the D20 system was OGL. And it wasn't great because it was basically cookie cutter, like slap on, here's D20 system and these names.
There was a lot of games like that.
They did a lot of that to a lot of IPs. But I know Wyvern Gaming is working on it for Stargate. And I know that NGM Studios had the say on which system they used. So they chose to use 5e. So it's going to be for 5e. But I heard the last time I saw the test play documents, which was like a year ago, it did look different, and it definitely had like some like combat tactic abilities in there for like the soldiers. So I'm kind of curious to see how it's evolved since. And I know there's like different characters different types of characters you can play from the Stargate universe.
You mentioned Dragonlance a little while ago. Are you excited for some new Dragonlance?
Oh yeah, I am definitely interested to see what we got coming. I will say I'm a big Lord Soth fanboy here.
Yeah. The only person to get kicked out of Ravenloft. I agree.
You know, it's fine. You know, he's one of the few beings who's ever gotten to escape the Barovia and the Dark Powers.
I don't even attribute it to him escaping. They're just like they just shook their heads, shrugged, and kicked them out.
Yeah, it's like, we don't even want you here. Go back to where you came from. All right.
Yeah, I mean his story was fun in the sense that, like, well, spoilers if you haven't read that book from 30 years ago, but I guess he had 2 books in Ravenloft.
Yeah,
I think, yeah. And there were a lot of fun, but the idea, like, the thing that I loved about it was, like, his punishment was for his story to be told over and over again, but wrong.
Right. That was the kicker, right? It was
Yeah.
told wrong, and you're like, oh, I see why he's upset.
He was just like super anal retentive about his evilness.
Well, that was the funniest bit, right? Because people think, oh, you reliving the events of that led you down this path is suffering enough, and Prasad is like, no, I know it very well, intimately well, because I'm reminded of it every waking moment.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me it's wrong, and I hate it.
Did you read like I want to say recent, but sometimes I use that term and it might be 10 years ago. There was a couple of novels about draconians that had come out from Dragonlance. Doom Brigade was one of them. I don't remember what the other one was called, but they were like leftovers from the war.
Yeah, I remember seeing them. I don't think I read them because I know at that point because I go through weird phases with my fantasy. Like I'll read through fantasy. Now I'm mostly in the urban fantasy genre because that's my mainstay now. Like, that's where I
feel that.
So like I'm usually reading like, I'm a big Dresden fan. So I've been a Dresden fan for like years and years and years. And if you want something that's a little bit more Fae-like, if you're a big fan of Fae and stuff like that, October Day is a character that has a similar aesthetic right in the setting, but it deals with more with the Fae than anything else. So it's kind of cool. And so Dresden is just more wizardy and everything else. But I've been mostly hanging out in the urban fantasy genre for like the last 5 years. That's usually where I sit.
So Margaret Royce is on that project, and it was Kang's Regiment, The Chaos War was the series. It definitely worth checking out. It's fun. Like it starts off with like this settlement of draconians, and there's like a settlement of dwarves, and they kind of have a war between the two of them, except for not really. They just raid each other for supplies, and they generally do it without any like lasting violence. Like they try not to actually kill or harm each other. Hurt maybe a little bit, but not harm, right? For the draconians, it's just because, well, draconians are a very limited resource and they're not replaceable. So it's kind of an interesting take, and it was just like a cool way to see the bad guys in a different light.
Yeah, that is. I like that though, because it's nice to see them in different ways, especially now that like nowadays a lot of us look at narrative differently, and we kind of want to see we want to see more dimension in not only our characters but our villains and our adversaries. We want to see the dimensions of them. Like there's more layers, and we want to see what they can and what they are capable of.
There's you mentioned urban fantasy, so like I had gotten into the steampunk kick just because I just been bored with fantasy, and so there was a series called Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences, and it was like this mashup of steampunk and occult. Which was a lot of fun.
I was reading a kind of steampunk Victorian novel recently, and it's only just because I'm just like, okay, it's steampunk and Victorian. Let's just go whole ham into this. If we're gonna do steampunk, it might as well also be Victorian. So it was like a little bit like a detective series, and it kind of took a spin on like a lot of like classic Victorian like stories. Like they did a version of Jack the Ripper, where it was kind of like Jack the Ripper was a tinkerer, and so that's how Jack the Ripper was able to get rid of evidence but also still commit grisly murders. And so like this detective had to find out about who was doing it and figure out who was Jack the Ripper. And it was a fun little series. And I know for steampunk, Jim Butcher wrote like one that's kind of steampunk-esque, and it's like set in like an alternate future, and
Aeronauts Windless.
Yeah, and I like the series. I'm hoping, I can't wait for the next book. That's like, I really just want to see what more he can do.
Yeah, he kind of boned us by giving us one like 5 or more years ago.
Yeah, well, I think also because he wrote it because he needed to get that out of his system, but then also go, I need to finish Dresden, don't I? And
Yeah,
everyone's like,
yeah.
please.
I don't know. I think he got a divorce or something, and that probably like halted everything. I must not make any more money until this is done.
Right. I can feel that. I can feel that. But I will say that like I'm looking forward to reading the we're getting close to the end of for Dresden at least, or at least some part of an end. So I'm kind of like looking forward to it. My friends and I who've been reading it since we were like teenagers were like, wow, we're gonna finally end a portion of our lives. I'm like, well, look, I don't mind starting another book series. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I hope he returns to that world, but with different characters.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I would
different
like that.
Yeah, the Aeronaut's Windlass it's a great book. The cats are the best part of it.
The cats are the best part. Like if anyone is in chat's like not knowing, like the cats can talk. They're magical familiars. They're like the best thing ever. It's kind of like if you took if you took Salem from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the old 90s version, not Chilling Adventures, and actually incorporated more sass and put it into a steampunk setting.
That sounds accurate. Oh, and cats can use armor and weapons.
So, yes. Oh man, that is why they're so cool.
Yeah. No, yeah. I because that's supposed to be a trilogy, so
yeah.
I'm excited to see Butcher return to that. Codex Alera was a good series, and it was definitely like a very different take on magic. Like,
yeah,
like it was like magic, but if it involved elementals and Pokemon. So
it's you got the best of everything there.
yeah. So we'll see what comes next. What
yeah.
What do you think of I don't know, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. I often get distracted by myself. Sometimes I am like a cat in that regards. So when you get back to regular gaming, what are you hoping to start with?
When I get back to regular gaming, I'm hoping I get to start with some of the new systems that I got. Like I still buy RPG books even when
we all do.
So I will say out of the large stack of games that I just acquired recently, I know one of them is I want to give a try to the new Cortex Prime. Also because I want to get ready for that when the Dragon Prince RPG comes out for it, because Tales of Xadia is going to be great. So I'm looking forward to that.
Ninja running elves. What more do you need?
I mean, that's all I ask for in life. So I really am looking forward to at least that. And that is definitely one I want to at least give a try to and learn is Cortex Prime. I don't know what kind of game I would play, but I'm sure I'll come up with something.
Yeah, I mean, I started. I am terrible anymore. I like start reading stuff and stop in the middle. But yeah, I had started reading that, and that system's interesting in the sense that like it can be as simple as you want, like Fate Accelerated simple, or as complex as you want.
Yeah. I do like that you have that versatility, because it's dependent on what you need. Which is sometimes something that I find very helpful for a lot of RPG systems, like, you know, making it accessible to everybody, where it's like, here, you can make it as easy as you want for yourself, or if you need it to be complicated because of reasons, well, you can, and it will still hold up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen now. I mean, it looks like a bunch of the D&D Beyond team walked. I'm
suspecting they're all going for doing stuff for Cortex, because, you know,
I don't know. Fandom owns it, so
yeah, I don't know. I just sense that I'm curious to see what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, they're gonna do something cool, but I'm kind of curious because, like, when I've been talking to Adam about Cortex, it's like, they were gonna set up the digital tools where you could kind of like build the game you want to play in the tool set, and then invite your players to play that game. Which for a system that's super modular like that, that would be super helpful. And I don't know what it's going to look like now. I just had a lot of confidence in Adam Bradford, as the lead. So, I don't know who's going to fill those shoes.
Right. Yeah. I know. Like, I remember when I saw those announcements, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of people at once.
Yeah. I guess it wasn't that many, but it was like really visible people.
Yeah, it was very visible people, but it was like people we either have met in conventions, like you and I have either met in conventions, or we've met or interacted with, like correspondences and stuff, and it just goes, wait, what's happening?
yeah, felt sudden and abrupt. But on that note, we are just past the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out?
I wanted to say thank you for having me, Dave. It's always great to be back here. I love being here all the time and hang out with you and everybody in chat. And if you really want more information about Unbreakable and what we have coming out, you can follow me on Twitter. I will usually be posting all my updates there.
Awesome. You're always welcome back. Thanks for coming on. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.